you will create both a layer state for the first floor electrical plan and the second floor electrical plan, and as you can see, it's got all the first floor layers there that you've already created, plus the 3 new layers for the electrical, minus the first floor dimension and the first floor text. So that's basically what this is. So let's go through what we're looking at here. There are 2 things that you can insert out of the shared directory. One is the first floor legend and one is the second floor legend. And once you get them in, they'll be out of the blocks, of course. I'm in the wrong place. Let's try that again. Shared directory, not R. Yes, shared directory. Find me. Residential. And then under the blocks there will be electrical plans. There's only 2 blocks in here. The E1 is the first floor legend and the E2 is the second floor legend. So bring that in to the drawing. If I remember correctly, I think you have to explode it once. Once you've exploded it, then you can grab any one of these symbols independently and just copy it over to the plan. And let's just go through what the symbols mean real quick. So the duplex receptacle is just your typical outlet with 2 places you can plug something into. The GFI, of course, is for anywhere near water, ground fault interrupt. WP is usually for outside, waterproof. It's probably GFI also, but waterproof GFI. The ones with a cover. 220 typically for like ovens or dryers, or possibly ranges depending on the make. Switches, that's a one-way switch here. It goes, the light switch to the room. 3-way, you'll have to have at least 2 of those anytime you have a, that connects to a light or lights. Dimmer switch, you can control how bright the room is, how the light in the room is. Exhaust vent, that works for both the bathrooms and the utility. This is a typical gas outlet. A lot of times you'll have that to like a water heater or a range or something like that. TV outlets, like for cable TV. GDs for garage door opener. DVs for doorbell. Doorbell chimes, they're not wired in the same way, so you don't show any wiring to those. You just put them in the hall or some centrally located place. Then you've got your phone outlets and your data outlets. This would be like a computer outlet. SD is the smoke detector, T is the thermostat. More often than not, we don't even locate those in our plans because the HVAC contractor typically decides where that goes anyway. But some builders would like to see that, and it is on this plan. Recessed lights, that means the whole light is up in the ceiling. That's kind of like a down light, but it's not out below the ceiling, it's up in the ceiling. Adjustable recessed LED lights. I never can remember what that exactly stands for, but it's a more energy efficient light. It's a directional light as well. Ceiling mount, that's just your normal one fixture in the middle of the room. Wall mounted sconce, that's on the wall, sometimes on stairs or in hallways or on the entry or on the porch. Under cabinet fluorescent fixture, that's the ones that you put underneath the cabinets. You can buy a $5 version that you can just plug into the wall, or you can get more fancy and actually wire all the under cabinet lights together and put them on a switch. Just depends on how much money you want to spend on it. Motion sensor, it's a floodlight, outside floodlight. Sometimes they put switches in the master bedroom to be able to control whether they're on or off, or if you just want to turn them on automatically if you hear something and you want to see what's going on. It doesn't necessarily have to be controlled just by the motion sensor. Chandelier lights, those are a hanging light, typically in the dining or breakfast or entry areas, typically where they're going to see those. Fluorescents, 1x4 fluorescent fixture, that's a small fluorescent fixture. They can be surface mount, they can be recessed. The ones in here are 2x4, 2 feet by 4 feet, and they're recessed fluorescent fixtures. And then here's the ceiling fan with a light kit. Now some of these are, I would say, quasi dynamic. I wouldn't say they're completely dynamic, but what I mean by that is you can turn the outlet when you grip it with the dot here. And if you have your ortho on, then it's going to go in the perpendicular direction. The typical way most people show this is with the prongs against the wall. My particular office turns them backwards for some reason. I don't know why we do that, but that's the way they've always done it. They did that before I got there. So they actually connect this other side, which is, if you look at any textbook, that's backwards. So anyway, for in here, the prongs should be next to the wall, and it should be exactly on top of the wall. All right, you would get the same things. Now sometimes you have to turn the text with it. So if you had one of these conditions, like with the GFI, when you turn the outlet, you know, you can move the text. They're separate from each other. Sometimes you want to, the temptation is to rotate the entire thing together, and you don't want to do that because sometimes the text is going to be backwards when you do that. So it's always left to right usually, and then on occasion it's from bottom to top, just like normal text is. But typically you can separate the two like I just did there. And then waterproof, that's going to be outside. 220 is usually for an appliance. These are also, you can turn the switch. Now look real closely at this. There is actually one part of the S that's slightly smaller than the other one. It's either in this position or that position. You don't want the smaller position next to the wall. So make sure the smaller loop is always next to the wall. I'll show you what the meaning of the plant here in a minute. So this one, when we turn this way, the 3 doesn't rotate with it. So this might be one of those cases, you know, where we actually need to rotate it all together. So it ends up like that. And occasionally, because the 3 gets into the wall, this might actually need to be at the other end. But again, the 3 is reading left to right, and the smaller loops on the S is to the left. Nope, I didn't mean to erase that completely. Same thing with the dimmer. There is no dynamics on the exhaust vent. The exhaust vent is required in the utility when there's no operable window. It's also required in the bathrooms when there's no operable window, but it depends on the situation. If you've got a master bath and it's got an operable window, then you don't really have to have it. If you've got a master bath that has a fixed glass window, then you do have to have it. If you have a master bath with an operable window, but the toilet's actually in a smaller room that's enclosed with a door, you don't have to have it in the major master bath, but you do have to have it in the toilet room. On the other hand, if it's a fixed glass and there's a door on the toilet room, then you do have to have a vent for both rooms. Or if you have an operable window and there's no door on the toilet room, then you don't have to have any vent in there. It just kind of depends on what's operable and what's open. And anyway, for our purposes, we will have a vent in the bathroom. The gas is just like the other ones. You can turn it by the dot there. The TV, sometimes this text comes in wrong for whatever reason, but again, you can change that under the text options to like style as BT non-additive as opposed to annotative, and then they'll probably change it to like the 4.125, just like we did on the what was it, the table on the first floor plan. Same thing for these phone outlet and the data outlet are actually the same symbol. You can change it to the back and forth here if you need to. Just pick whichever one you need. Without the shading, it's data. With the shading, it's the phone. Smoke detector is, there's no dynamics on that other than the circle in the middle, which just lets you move it. Same thing with the dot here, you can turn it. This is a recessed light, like a down light. This is an adjustable light, so you can change the direction on which way it's pointing. It shows you, it's like a spotlight that you can turn directions on. Ceiling mount, that's your normal ceiling mounted light. Used to be all incandescent. Those have been outlawed, so unless you're buying one that's already been manufactured several years ago, you can't even, they're not even manufacturing those anymore. But they still have ceiling mounted lights. They just don't happen to be incandescent. They're either LED or some other type of fluorescent light at this point. Mounts to the wall. Typically we're going to see that outside on this plan. This is a symbol for the under cabinet fluorescent fixture. You can expand that by grabbing one end of it and dragging it, and it goes underneath the upper cabinet. Motion sensor, that's usually outside, located on corners in a lot of cases, sometimes tied back into the master bedroom with a switch. Again, hanging lights, basically the chandelier light fixture, usually for dining or breakfast or entry areas. 1x4, or maybe for closets or utility. Ceiling fans could be bedrooms or any habitable area like family room or living room. Typically 2 switches for that. So what you will do is once you get this in and explode it, you can grab any one of these things and carry it back over here to the plan. Things to watch out for is that when you put these in, you'll probably drag it, it'll be over out in the middle of space. When you move that over to the wall, make sure your object snaps are on. When you do that, let's see, endpoint, center, center's good, intersection, I would take extension. So for the electrical plan, endpoint, usually midpoint's good too. Endpoint, midpoint, I would add center for this. Intersection and perpendicular. Typically I just have endpoint, midpoint, intersection, and perpendicular on, but center's good for this as well. Alright, so what you can do is then grab the outlet, so, and then you want to make sure you're completely against the wall here. What you don't want to do is eyeball it and miss the wall. So, because you can actually see that gap when it prints. So there shouldn't be any gap between the end of the plug there and the wall. Smoke detectors in the room. For the wiring that connects the switch to the fixtures, this is going to be on that wire layer. Drag this out a little bit. This one. The fixtures, like the light fixtures, you know, anything that's like a light or an outlet or an exhaust, that's going to be on fixture. The wiring is specifically talking about the connection there. And those are arcs, not splines. I think splines are way too hard to control. We banded splines a long time ago at my office. We're going to use arcs for those. And then the other thing is, this is a phantom line, so make sure you add the right line type. So to change a line type, you can click on top of it. If you don't have the one in, if it comes in continuous or something, to change that you would go to load and then find it over here in the list and just okay it back through till you get and load to get it into the, anyways, it's Phantom 2. The thing about this line is you have to get enough of an arc on it for it to show up. So this is arc, It's just a 3-point arc, so it's basically from the end point there and to the edge of the circle on the fixture. You can see it didn't show up as a phantom line. That's because the arc is not quite big enough for it to show up. If I take the midpoint there and expand it a little bit, oh, you know what? See this up here? It's coming in as continuous because this is not set to by layer. At some point I must have been doing a line that was continuous, so it defaulted to that. So if it's not coming in right, this is one of the places you can check. Since I changed it to by layer because it's set to the right thing, you can see it came in as the right line type. But it will come in like that. It's still a phantom line, but you have to have enough of an arc on it for that to show up. Alright, so then don't penetrate the light fixture itself. To find the center of the room, the easiest way to do that is to draw yourself, I'm going to change this to a red line so we don't get confused. Just draw a line that's a diagonal. From corner to corner, and then you would take that, if you were just starting to add this, you would copy it from the legend, and then to move it in the right place, since we've got center on now, you could take the center of that circle and put it on the midpoint of that line. Not quite. Which one was it? Was it this one? Yeah. See if we can force it. Right there. So that's where I had it. So center to midpoint for that. Now, the directional lights here should be on a grid of 4 feet by 8 feet. So basically you're 4 feet this way to the center, 4 feet that way to the center, 2 feet that way to the center, 2 feet that way to the center. Four feet by 8 feet. So 4 feet and 4 feet, 2 feet and 2 feet. That's where those belong. Then we've got our data and phone and outlets over here, outlets there, TV, cable TV there. Here's one of those cases. See how the top of the S is smaller than the bottom of the S, so the S is, the smaller loop is still to the left here, and so the D in this case goes up to the left side of the S. In some cases like this, the 3 would need to go to the other direction, because if you go that direction you're in the wall, so it needs to go below in those cases. For the walk-in closet, you need to center the light between the shelves, not the walls, so it's kind of pushed forward a little bit. At first glance, it may not seem like the fixtures are organized through here, but basically all those fixtures are based on the midpoint of the window all the way down. And then this is based on the midpoint of between the walls here, which if the door is located correctly, that will be the midpoint. And then what you're doing the fixtures in the room, this is based on the midpoint of the tub, this is based on the midpoint of the lavatory, this is based on the midpoint of the toilet, and this is centered between this light and that light. Then you've got a GFI. Here are some wall sconces here for the bathroom lights, and you can see it's mounted against the wall. Alright, so typically you want to use that 1.0 for the line type scale. There are cases where I do make an exception, and especially in cases like this, it's next to impossible to get that 1.0 to work in there. So if anytime you see the smaller dashes, you can change it to 0.5. but your default should always be 1.0. Only change it to the 0.5 when I have. So basically you would just go into the properties and change the line type scale to 0.5 here. Because if you leave it at 1, it's not likely you're going to be able to get that in. That's not the right line type anyway. I would have to be by layer. Alright, so if I mount that bar, it'll show up, but if I get a little bit closer in there, I'm actually going through this light fixture to get that to show up. That's not good practice, so I just changed it to a 0.5. And then we've got a dimmer switch here. This switches to the vent, this switches to the light, then it switches back over to here. The vent light here, this light again is centered in the room. We've got another sconce light over here. And again, especially like for these two lines, you probably will have to change that to 0.5. But the default, most of the lines should be 1.0, not 0.5. So I'm going to erase my guidelines here. There is a water pollutant and a outside flood up there. GFI, here's some chimes, outlet. This is centered on between walls here. Alright, and in the kitchen, basically centered off the sink is where those lights are. Let me change this back to so those are centered off the sink all the way across. These are aligned with each other. It's kind of off the edge of the dishwasher there, just slightly off the edge, just slightly off of the countertop, but the actual alignment of the lights are there. And then in the middle here, off the range, those are all in line. These are right next to the countertop, and they're all in line. And then these are in line as well, including the ones below down here. Now in the kitchen itself, we've got several GFIs, data phone. Here's that under cabinet lighting. Make sure you don't put that directly against the edge of the upper cabinet, because if you do, this will bleed and you won't be able to see. It will blur together, so it needs to be a little bit off. This switch is going to the disposal. This switch is going to the under cabinet lights. And then we've got a three-way switch going to the kitchen lights, which ends up being another three-way back over here. We've also got a 220 here by the range. Thought I erased that. And then the gas is here. And then another GFI. There's no right or wrong to this, but these do need to line up here. Didn't draw that from the center. These are basically aligning here, and then this is actually an alignment through here, and don't forget these are aligned with those up there. So there's two three-way switches in there. One of them's going up to the atrium at the second floor, and the other three-way is going to these, and the other three-way switches over here along with some outlets. Out here on the porch, halfway between the siding and the edge of the column here. That's where these lights will be. And then in this direction, it's just centered on the windows. Again, between the siding and the edge of the column there, that'll be centered in that direction. Then you've got your waterproof outlets. This switch is going up to the second floor. So this is a multi-liter, but it has been changed to be a little bit bigger. And to get this text, it's not the normal size text. This is more to match the rest of the text on this layer because it's larger than on a normal text. So this has to be, basically you've got to fight with it for a little bit. So it is on that layer, but it's still a multi-liter. When you first put in the multi-liter, it's going to come in like that as a red. Let's see, what is it? Is it enter escape? And then of course you'll have to fool with trying to get it in the right direction and the right size. Alright, but before we do that, we need to change it to cyan. The multi-liters actually have in the properties a place where you can change that. Liter color, instead of the layer, it's just the liter color. So you want to change that to cyan. And then the arrowhead, instead of being 1/16, I believe is 3/32. We'll double check that in a minute. So that's going to increase the size of the arrowhead. If you're not out far enough, the arrow won't show up. And then you can rotate it to whatever it needs to be. But it's actually a separate little entity here at the end. See, it's not part of the wiring, but it is on the same. It is on the same layer, but we've made modifications to the multi-liter. And then for this text here, well, I would take that to a non-annotative. I've got, this was an old style here, but it's probably non-annotative 96 is what it needs to be, and then this needs to be 6. To get it up to the right size. So a couple outlets and GFI in the kitchen. This light's just centered in that closet behind the utility. This light is centered between the edge of the countertop and the corner wall over here. So this is on that diagonal, it's centered on that. It's basically directly over the table if you've got the table centered correctly. A couple outlets there, floodlight, some more sconces. The sconces on the outside attached to the siding, not to the frame. Utility, 220, gas, a couple of 110s. This light is not directly centered in that room. You can eyeball that one. I don't really care if it's exactly in the center or not, but it kind of needs to be out here in this space. In the garage, these are actually centered. If you took a line from here to there, you will find that all these are located off the midpoint of that line. So halfway down this. These are, I think, are 6 feet apart, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So locate this one first as the 1x4. In other words, you can, just like we were doing on the first floor plan for some of the, draw the diagonal here and then put it on the midpoint there. And then space the other ones 6 feet apart from each other. couple more floodlights out here, a few more GFIs, the garage door opener here. Alright, the one thing we haven't talked about is how to get these. This is not a normal text. This is based on the room title text based off the first floor. So what you can do to get that the right size is go back and follow the first floor text, and this is just a temporary thing to get one of the room titles. And as long as it's editable, in other words it's been exploded and you've changed it, then what you can, I'm going to copy it to the side. You don't need to do this, I'm just to demonstrate. So then you could go to I'm in the wrong place. Go to here, I'll layer next one to it. Copy objects to new layers, the third one over, and you could select that and then enter it, and then it's asking for the name, which is the name of the layer, so N for name, and then you can go down and find the E1 floor anno, which is the electrical text. You okay that, then you enter it one more time, and now I'm going to rerun my layer state for the electrical. I ran the wrong one, not the first floor plan, first floor electrical plan. All right, so this is the one I just copied over. So now it's the right size height here. So what you need to do is just edit that to where the ceiling and the floor is out, and then you just copy that around and change the text. It should not be this size text. If you put in this size text, that'll be wrong. So this is wrong. It needs to be the same size of what was on the first floor that you can copy to layer. If it's a block, you won't be able to copy. As long as it's exploded, you'll be able to copy it over like I just showed you. And the same thing would apply to the second floor. So on the second floor, it's very similar to the first. Same thing, no second floor text, no second floor dimensions. You will have the 3 new layers for the electrical. Again, just draw your diagonal to create the center line for the fan to get the midpoint. Then you have your outlets and your smoke detector and your TV, gas. This is one of those cases where there's no way to get this light 12 inches away from the shelf, so it's a wall mounted light. And then these fixtures are centered between this wall and that wall, and they're all aligned with each other. But basically between the wall frame line here and the wall frame line there, they're centered there. And then this fixture in the middle is based on the midpoint of that wall. And then this fixture is halfway between this wall and that wall. And these fixtures are halfway between this wall and that wall here. So, in other words, from here to there, coming off the midpoint. It's in the same, so basically between this line and that line. And then we've got a vent, a light, again 0.5, 0.5, this is 1.0 here, GFI, sconce here, S3 switch here, smoke detectors, typical. This light, take the diagonal in this room from this corner to that corner to find out the center line, the midpoint for that. Then this is not technically centered. I moved this over slightly so you could see the plug. I guess you could center it, but not really necessary. Needs to be over the landing though. And this one is centered based on here to there. So that's the midpoint of that line. And again, you will have to create the multi-leader, change the leader color, rotate it into place, make the arrow 3/30 seconds, and then put in the text as a non-annotative text and make it 6 inches high. And then this, of course, is centered in this space. And then we've got TV outlets and 3-way outlets. So there is, especially with the lighting, some organization where things need to be aligned. Usually it's centered between walls, so bear that in mind and keep in mind all the way through if it's lining up through the plan. I don't think there's anything particularly hard about electrical plans. This is that one case, or at least one case, where you might, if you don't put this in the right place, you might be further than 6 feet. So, you can always check the distance on that. From here to here, it's telling me that's about 7 inches. And in the other direction, kind of to the center there. What is that? 4'0". So it's about 4'8" or so. So that's well within, if I measured that correctly. The other way to do that is just put a dimension on it. So that's 5'7", and that's 6. So technically speaking, that outlet's not in the right place, because what that tells me is that I'm at 6'1 3/4". I can't be any more. I'm not supposed to be any more than 6. So I probably need to move that over at least 2 inches. So 5'5", and that's not quite 7, so that would work. But that's real easy to get more than 6 feet there. And you can't be more than 6 feet from an opening. Alright, like I was saying, I don't think there's anything particularly hard about the electrical plan. But it's one of those things, it's very tedious. It takes a long time to do. It's not like the elevations in the roof plan, I'm not saying that, but it's tedious and it takes a long time to do. So if you think you're going to get this done in half an hour or an hour, I don't think so. It takes longer than that because it's just tedious as all get out. So be aware of that. But anyway, again, if there were mistakes on the first and second floor plans already, be sure to correct those, because I will mark them again if they're still wrong on the electrical plans. And you would do the same thing with the text. Follow the second floor, copy one of the room names over, and then edit it, and then just copy it around. And then once you get to the view layouts, you want to make sure all your layers are on and thawed. When you create these, of course, same thing as the layer states. It'd be the same layers. I actually created 2 different viewports, one for the actual plan and one for the legend. So I didn't have to have the legend so close to the plan in model space. So I actually got one viewport for this and one, but they're both at an 1/8 inch scale. You need to put them in at an 1/8 of an inch annotative scale. And then the rest of it's, same things we've done before. I would probably, create a copy, move it in, and then change the layers in there for the electrical layers. So nothing really hard about it. It's just tedious. But pay attention to alignment of lighting, the direction of the switches, make sure your outlets are against the walls, and make sure you're using the right size of room text. Okay. So I'm done talking for the night. So if you want to stay and work, great. If you don't, if you want to start your holiday early, that's fine too.
When are we turning in the list?
That's probably the following week, because Monday the foundation is due. Let me see, I don't think I've got that up, but we can look it up real quick. Tentative schedule. So on Monday, the foundation plan is due, the corrected floor plans are due along with the original red lines. And then the following week, the first and second floor electrical plans will be due. And then I'll give you back the elevations, roof plan, and foundation plan. It takes me a little longer to do the elevations and the roof plan, so that won't probably have those ready by next time. But usually after that, it's going to be constantly returning stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, the electrical plans are not due until a week from this coming Monday, but the foundation plan and corrected floor plans are due on this Monday. Okay. And I'll put this up